So the last part of the series of program planning models is healthy communities. This was really a movement that began in the 80s and spread, certainly with the help of WHO, to lots of different locations throughout Europe, and something that is still used here, although again can be a bit more time consuming and require a lot more engagement than some other models. The steps to healthy communities, which is spelled out in the change tool, which we'll talk about next, really map onto the generalized model, but I want to just really emphasize here that the focus of healthy communities and the change tool is to promote and support community ownership rather than planner ownership. So the idea that you have shared values amongst the community, and the community is the one who owns the needs, the resources, and the planning process, and it can be empowering, and it really puts the role of the program planner as simply a facilitator, a contracted outsider, so to speak. So it really kind of calls us what we are in many instances and leaves the power in the hands of the community. So the change tool, which is part of healthy communities, looks like this, and again maps very nicely onto the generalized model we talked about in the intro. You're putting together a team. I told you this would be repetitive, right? They specify 10 to 12 individuals, which includes a bunch of different stakeholders in the community, but again, focusing on the community itself, not so much those who are outside of that community or business owners or CEOs of organizations in that community. So next would be phase 2, develop a team strategy. So once you have a team assembled of diverse members of the community itself, and you as a facilitator will then have the team come together to make decisions about how they most efficiently and effectively want to move forward. So this is not building strategy just yet, it's strategizing about how they want to move together and make decisions as a whole. So the next piece would then be equivalent essentially to a needs assessment, reviewing all 5 change sectors. And change sectors in this model are spelled out as community at large, community institutions and organizations, healthcare, school, and work site. Hopefully this is ringing some bells with some social determinants, trying to look at the overall picture of a particular community. Next in this tool would be to gather data, so begin the assessment phase. So although you've just done the scan essentially in phase 3 and looked at the big picture, phase 4 is actually gathering data for the assessment. Phase 5 is reviewing the data gathered, so discuss what was discovered in the needs assessment and rank to some degree each item to prioritize where they want to move forward. Phase 6 is enter data, so you're organizing data for analysis. Phase 7 is review consolidated data, summarizing the data to accommodate prioritization and decision making. So this, different than other models, this is much more specific. It kind of gives you point-by-point instructions in a way that some of the other models don't. And phase 8 would then be build a community action plan. So there's a lot of specifics in telling you to get from a needs assessment to building an action plan in a way that you don't see in other models. But when you think about the purpose of this, this was put together so that communities could then work on their own. And maybe those who are not too familiar with doing this process can really think through each step one by one. So phase 8 would be build the action plan, involves translating the prioritized data and articulating measurable objectives and action steps. Make sense? So although it doesn't get into specifics about evaluation, it's where you would stop and then largely implementation would take place. The last one we're talking about is SMART, Social Marketing Assessment and Response Tool. I'm guessing you've heard of this, but just in case you haven't, we'll walk through some of the details. We're almost done, I promise. So this came out of the middle to late 90s. You'll see a lot of literature out there by Niger and Thackeray. They are well known for their work and it crops up on a very regular basis. So maybe next to precede, proceed, SMART might be one that you hear most about. There's 7 phases, but the heart, as is said in here, the heart of this model are phases 2 through 4, which are usually happening at the same time. So This is the easiest way to look at it, again, right out of your textbook, so feel free to reference back if you need to, and there's quite a bit of information on the internet about this if you're looking for more information, or don't hesitate to ask me for more information as well. So we'll tick through these and we'll get to the homework assignment. Phase 1 of the SMART model is preliminary planning, harkening again back to the generalized model. So identifying a health problem, naming it in terms of behavior, develop general goals, and outline preliminary plans for evaluation. So kind of speculating about what you're going to see. Phase 2 is consumer analysis. So this is where you're segmenting and identifying the priority population. So you might be looking at, this comes back to communication classes, segmenting the population. We cannot look at a community, generally speaking, and say, as a whole, this community is experiencing X, Y, or Z. Usually within this big community, there are subsets who are experiencing things a little differently, right? We can segment a population by race, which I don't recommend. We can segment a population by age, which might be appropriate if we're looking for STIs or looking at diabetes. We can segment by a whole number of different factors of individuals, but just so you understand what segmentation means, there it is. In phase 2, you're segmenting and identifying the priority population. You're identifying formative research methods, again, kind of looking at literature to see what's happening, identifying wants and needs and preferences of the community members themselves, and developing preliminary ideas of preferred interventions. So again, it's a bit of a needs assessment, and it's still pre-planning, figuring out where you want to go and how you want to get there. The next phase in the SMART model is a little different than the other models we've looked at, and market analysis for phase 3. So establishing and define the market mix by using the 4 Ps. So SMART pulls in this social marketing piece, some skills and thoughts from business and marketing that we haven't seen in previous models. So the 4 Ps are, I wrote them down so I didn't forget, place, product, promotion, and price. It's a crafty way to pull in from different disciplines how to most effectively reach a group of folks by considering place, price, product, and promotion, right? We can use these in our own intentions, not just in trying to get someone to buy something. So here you're assessing the market to identify competitors. So behavior, when you think of a needs assessment, so let's say we're working on STI prevention, using a health promotion, right, effort, there might be competing messages, there might be competing organizations who have the same message. Ideally, that's not the case. But it's important to recognize who else is putting what other information out there that might be influencing behaviors and the messaging that they're receiving. And also, just as important to understand the allies. Who else is supporting these same efforts? Are there other folks who are already working towards this goal, and can we partner with them, right? So looking at the market, so to speak, of the individuals on the particular topic you're focusing on based on the needs articulated by the community. I know this gets complicated. The next phase in SMART is channel analysis. So you're identifying appropriate communication messages and strategies. This is an art all to itself. So if we are trying to get older adults to get tested for hepatitis C, for example, we would use probably different channels of communication than we would if we were trying to get hold of 14-year-old women or adolescents to prevent teen pregnancy, right? I would envision that if we're using a channel to get to teens, texting would be one of them, Snapchat, you name it, Instagram, those kinds of avenues. Very, very different if we're trying to reach a group of people 65 and above to talk to their doctor about getting tested for Hep C, right? Maybe then commercials would make the most sense, or pamphlets in primary care physician offices or dental offices where people are coming in because teeth are usually an issue after 65, right? So you're assessing options, identifying, again, those communication messages, the avenues in which you're going to reach those people with those messages, and identifying communication rules for program partners. So ideally, you'll have partnerships and everybody can be disseminating some version of the same message at the same time. So if you haven't noticed, there's a bend in SMART that is talking largely about messaging and communication in the program planning. So this would be appropriate only for certain kinds of programs, not all of them. The next phase, development interventions, materials, and pretest. Kind of standard issue, you can read the bullet points, but this is developing the intervention itself and the materials that will be used. Again, this goes back to more of a communication program plan and intervention than anything else. Implementation, communicate with partners, activate communication and distribution strategies. So this is the engaging of all the planning you've just done around how you're going to communicate and what the message is going to be in that communication. And then evaluation. Sometimes harder to get to when you're just talking about communication program planning rather than something that may be more tangible. So we just covered all of the big heavy hitters. Not to say there aren't more and those should be neglected, but I just wanted to make sure you had some understanding of the basics of these models. So there's a couple more resources. This is a short list, but there are plenty of them out there. I just wanted to nudge you along into thinking about looking for your own resources if you're so inclined. Community Toolbox is a great resource for many things and for a deeper understanding and illustrations of some of these program plans and many other facets of health promotion efforts. MapIt also has a wonderful website that you can play around with. So just two of many. Feel free to nose around, and if you can't find anything that you're looking for, come back and find me and I'll help you find it. So homework number 2 for our semester. Here's what I'd like for you to do, much like we did last week. Bring it in with you. You'll have a time to turn it back in if you need to by Friday of next week by midnight. But for this week, I'd like for you to describe which model you feel you'd most appropriate in our class project. I know that we don't know the needs just yet, so this is absolutely speculatory, but given what you think we're going to do with a needs assessment, given what you think we might find, given what we've talked about so far on our campus or on a college campus in general, which model do you feel like you might want to engage in the process of program planning and why? I'm way more concerned about the why than I am the what. And then using the article that was assigned to you this week, the Mertz article, please identify 3 ways in which the pre-seed, proceed model was either useful or ill-fitting for their purposes, which was a clinical diagnosis of adolescent idiopathic scoliosis. I'm hoping that this will help you to get into the reading a bit more, but also see that although these models can be helpful, they don't fit every effort. So if you have any questions, you know where to find me. Take care.